Welcome to the Frequency Labyrinth. I am Adrienne McDonald, your host. This podcast is for you if you're done with surface level self-help and ready for something deeper and actually transformative. Around here, we work with ancient wisdom, human design, gene keys, and shamanic practices, not as knowledge to collect, but as tools to live by. This isn't about one size fits all. It's about learning to work with your energy, your design, and your life. This is about integration and embodiment. We go deep here with ancient wisdom, practical integration, so that you can develop ironclad self-trust. Let's get into it. Hello, beautiful humans, and welcome back to the Frequency Labyrinth. Today we are walking through July's cosmic energy mix, and it's a lot. We are coming off of a full moon in Capricorn. Jupiter has just entered into Leo. If I had to give this month a simple title, it would be Expect the Unexpected. There is a lot going on energetically this month. I probably will not cover every transit. I'm going to hit the highlights, the ones I think are important. And I know that there's a lot of churn out there about this month. It is one of the most active of the year, and it has some of the most challenging transits that we're going to see in 2026. So, and I don't say that in a fear-mongering kind of way, because that's not really how I want to work with things. It's not how I want you to work with things. I'm not interested in turning the sky into a cosmic jump scare machine where everything is a reason to panic. And there is something to be said for being mindful. And also Mercury is in retrograde. So July has a lot going on. There's tension, there's movement, there is volatility, there's stationing retrogrades, there's big outer planet conversations, and there's several moments where the energy can move quickly enough that your first instinct may be to react before you've actually taken in what's happening. So that's why we do these cosmic overviews, to sort of give you some insight, opportunity to get ahead of the game. And I believe that the deeper invitation of July is not just expect the unexpected, it's expect the unexpected and then pay very close attention to whether you're responding or reacting, because those are not the same things. A reaction comes from the oldest part of the pattern. It comes from the nervous system, the wound, the identity trying to protect itself, the part of you that has seen something like this before and immediately assumes that it knows what it is, and sometimes bad, but it has a presence behind it. It has enough punch, if you will. And a response has a little bit more space in it. A response can still be firm and clear and immediate and decisive, but there's less punch, more presence. It has enough stillness in it to let the current moment be the current moment instead of collapsing into every other moment that you felt hurt, confused, or disappointed. And I say that because July doesn't really give us a lot of sleepy background music going on. July gives Mars conjunct Uranus and Gemini, and Jupiter squaring Chiron, and Jupiter opposing Pluto, et cetera, et cetera. So there is a lot. But when I look at the human design sun transits that are moving through this month, I think they give us a map for how to move through the volatility without becoming consumed by it. You know, when we enter the month, we begin with the Gate of Stillness, and we move into provocation, development, details, stimulation, leadership, and then revelation. And so that's an arc of a sort. And we begin by learning how to steady ourselves, and life pokes at the unresolved places, and then something new starts to develop. And then we have to be precise about what we're doing with the information, and we have to notice what's enriching us versus what's simply distracting us. And then we're asked what kind of leadership is actually needed. And by the end of the month, something is revealed because we have lived through the experience to see something differently. So July begins on the 1st with the sun in Human Design Gate 52, the Gate of Stillness, with the gene keys progression of stress and restraint and stillness. And I kind of love that because, when you start off the month coming off a full moon in Capricorn and Mercury retrograde, you might want to lean into that stillness a little bit more, especially now that Mars has made its entrance into Gemini as well and is positioning itself for that first conjunction with Uranus. And it feels like that standing at the doorway before everything gets super loud, asking you to find your center. And 52 through the last several days of June, it's not about zoning out or checking out or disassociating. It's about gathering your energy instead of scattering it in every direction. And it's the capacity to remain internally anchored, which we talked about a lot in June, when the external environment starts moving faster than expected. And, the shadow of this gene key is stress. And I think that word's important because stress is not always about how much is happening. Sometimes stress is our inability to stay with what is happening without slipping into old patterns, fragmenting. You can still have a full calendar and be regulated. You can also have one mildly inconvenient email sent to you that sends you into a spiral. I remember getting several of those while I was in corporate because it hits that exact place where you already feel behind or unsupported or judged or afraid of, getting it wrong. And then Gate 52 is asking us to notice where our attention leaks out of us before anything else has happened. One of the most challenging transits of 2026 comes up on and perfects on July 4th. We'll be feeling this from July 1st through probably Tuesday of the following week when Mars conjoins Uranus in Gemini. And this is one of the big expect the unexpected signatures of the month. Mars is action and impulse and heat and conflict and courage and movement. And Uranus is disruption and liberation and shock and electricity and rebellion and innovation and sudden change. And when we put these together, we're dealing, and especially in Gemini, we're dealing with fast words, fast news, fast decisions, fast pivots, fast nervous system responses, and the kind of mental stimulation that can make people feel erratic, agitated, courageous all before breakfast. This is not inherently bad energy. It can bring breakthroughs. It can cut through stagnation. It can give you the courage to say what you've not been willing to say or try something that you have been overthinking for far too long. Collectively, though, we would expect to see a little bit more volatility in the world. And that's why people are saying that, especially here in the States around July 4th, don't go out and do something stupid. We've got a lot of heat, like physical heat, that's going to make people more agitated. Be mindful of your surroundings, etc. It's not a transit that you want and go to take a lot of physical risk either. Don't light off the fireworks without making sure that everything is clear, or don't light illegal fireworks, that sort of thing. It's you see it in the news where someone, blew off a finger or something. This transit it carries that type of energy. So just be mindful. Slow your roll, right? Don't take any unnecessary risk. But like I said, on a personal level, it can make you feel like the first impulse feels like the final truth. And this is where July starts testing whether you know the difference between a response and a reaction. Especially with Mercury being in retrograde, there's a lot of opportunity here for arguing, like at those family cookouts. And you got to really be asking yourself the entire month, are you arguing to argue, or are you arguing and it's worth having the conversation to get into an argument? That type of energy. And from July 2nd to the 9th, the sun is moving through Gate 39, the Gate of Provocation. And the shadow gene key for that is Provocation. And the gift is dynamism. And the city is liberation. And if 52 teaches us how to sit still before the storm, 39 teaches us what happens when life starts poking the bear. So, yes, this gate can stir things up. It presses on places where the energy has become stagnant and trapped or resentful, defended, or all those stuck places, which there is a gift in that, right? We don't want to continue to be stagnant, but under the current transits this year with all this tension energy, just be mindful that the shadow could feel extra irritation, and it could sort of feel like irritation for the sake of irritation. It's someone says the wrong thing, a plan changes, a delay happens, the internet acts possessed because, hello, Mercury retrograde, and a person reveals their entire emotional maturity level in one sentence, and suddenly you're not responding to what happened, you're reacting to a whole archive of every similar moment you've ever lived, right? So, but the gift here is movement. It can show us where something has gone flat or false. It can reveal what's actually alive underneath polite versions of ourselves. It can wake up desire and creativity and courage and honesty. And, not every trigger is a truth, obviously, but every trigger does contain information. And 39 asked us to stop treating provocation as merely an inconvenience or an excuse to start shit for no reason, and really go deeper and ask what is trying to be liberated. And then on July 6th, when the sun is in Cancer squaring Saturn in Aries, this could be a little humbling moment. This could be definitely a humbling moment, because Cancer is emotional and protective and concerned with belonging and safety and nourishment and care. And Saturn in Aries is asking for a little bit more maturity, a little bit more agency, perhaps taking some action that make us feel a little uncomfortable. When the sun squares Saturn, we can feel blocked or delayed or maybe a little criticized or confronted by the gap with what we need emotionally and what life is asking us to take responsibility for. We as humans go through cycles. We go through cycles collectively. We go through cycles individually. And not every day is a picnic, but not every day we're down in the depths of Hades either, right? Like there's a mix. And although it may not be the most comfortable transit, it is an opportunity to show some of the grit that you need to show. Not a super long transit, but one that you'll notice if you feel like, I don't know, a couple of roadblocks have come up, or you're being asked to show what you're committed to at a different level. Or it could show up, especially during Mercury retrograde, where communication gets a little dicey of, I want someone else to understand what I need, but I also may need to communicate it a little bit more clearly. Or I want to be held, but I can't keep using my sensitivity as a reason to avoid the hard thing, right? the point is to mature our relationships with it. Because Cancer without Saturn can cling to what's familiar because familiar feels safe, even when it's no longer alive. And Aries without Cancer can charge forward to call independence when it's really just afraid of needing anyone else. And the square between those two signs with those particular placements is it's asking for something a little bit more integrated. And then on July 7th, Neptune stations retrograde in Aries. And this brings another revision to the month. Neptune in Aries has been stirring questions around identity and desire and spiritual courage. It is the myth of the self. It's the vision that you want to bring to life in your life. And, it's the place where we may confuse inspired action with fantasy or avoidance. And when it stations retrograde, the fog doesn't necessarily disappear immediately, but we do get some insight when we turn inward. We start reviewing the dream. We start asking if the thing that we've been chasing is really what we want to chase. And remember, Saturn and Neptune both entered into Aries the first part of this year, so there probably is some revision. Like I talked in my last newsletter about on the full moon being sort of the mid-year edit. That edit is going to continue probably for the rest of the month. And this is the reason why July has such a strong, don't rush the meaning quality. There's real insights available, but some of them are going to arrive through discomfort and disruption. And really the slow disillusion, the dissolving of illusions that we were very attached to. Neptune retrograde in Aries can ask us to examine what we have really gone down a fantasy rabbit hole and attached to, something that we've called intuition, which was actually just false urgency. And sometimes also confusing wanting to feel free with actually becoming free. Freedom requires a certain level of honesty. Liberation requires a certain level of consciousness. Otherwise, we just repeat the same pattern in a new outfit and call it a breakthrough because better branding or some bullshit like that. Then the 8th through the 13th, we move into Gate 53, the Gate of Development, with the Gene Keys progression of immaturity, expansion, and superabundance. This is like a new beginning gate. It carries the pressure to start something, to initiate a new cycle, to begin development before the whole path is visible. And I find this really interesting because it overlaps with the build-up to the new moon in Cancer on July 14th. So we're in this period where something is trying to begin and is definitely not fully formed because of all these review cycles that are going on. So Gate 53 might feel restless, particularly with all the rest of the transits in July. But I think that you'll get an inkling to the revision. Something wants to grow, not sure what it is quite yet. Might have an inkling to the project or relationship pattern or the body of work or a new internal orient. Something that you'll probably in a couple of months be able to look back and go, okay, all right, that was the turning point, the pivot point here. The shadow in this particular gate, the immaturity, just means something hasn't ripened yet, right? A lot of people abandon new beginnings because they expect them to arrive fully developed and elegant and coherent and, and all the things. But most beginnings are awkward. They're like a weird little baby deer legs. They wobble. They require care before they can carry weight. And I think 53 is asking us to respect the developmental process, right? I suspect that by this part of the month, some things will have already maybe have had some sudden shifts given the Mars-Uranus conjunction, and things will feel a little foggy. But you could start to, like I said, get some inklings around that. And then July 9th, Venus enters into Virgo. And this shifts the relational and values field into discernment, refinement, practicality, embodiment. Venus in Virgo, I feel like, isn't always given enough credit because Venus is in the fall here. But people like to describe it as picky, critical, over analytical, but there's this intelligence here around tending, improving, noticing, and carrying through attention. And the first decan, especially of Virgo, is a very mystical decan. Venus in Virgo loves what's real enough to be worked through. It wants the details to matter. It wants devotion to show up in the daily rhythm, just not like, it's almost like, okay, Venus in Virgo is like, yeah, Valentine's is great, but that shouldn't be like, it should be Valentine's every day. Like, why does it have to be these big declarations? Why can't it be just you bring me grocery store flowers, right? Or I buy grocery store flowers myself. It wants values that can be lived in the body, in the calendar, in the budget, and the habits. It's that everyday chop wood, carry water type of thing. And then, though, we've got some tension almost immediately because on July 11th, it opposes the nodes, and then on the 13th, it's making a square to Uranus. And again, this can create unexpected shifts around relationships and money and desire and beauty and body and work and values, and something that used to feel stable may suddenly feel stale or rocky, and something you thought you might have wanted may not hold the same charge. A relationship dynamic may reveal where you've adapted too much, and that level of adaptation has become self-erasure. Or a financial or creative situation may ask for a different level of flexibility. Again, I keep coming back to the Mercury being in retrograde in Gemini, especially that possibility of miscommunication. Are you calling something devotion when it's actually just over-functioning? Are you trying to be too hyper-independent? Are you calling something service when it's actually fear of disappointing people? Are you refining something because it's alive, or are you nitpicking at it because you're afraid to release it into the world? Venus squares Uranus as that lightning bolt energy. It can bring surprise attractions and sudden changes and unexpected expenses and relationship awakenings. The realization that something that was once supportive now feels restrictive. Again, this is where we go back to the theme of respond, don't react. It can be liberating because at the end of the day, Uranus wants things to be liberated. But it can also make novelty look like truth simply because it's louder than what's become familiar. And sometimes it reveals boredom. All of this is useful, but they don't all require the same response. And then on the 13th, the Sun conjoins Mercury in Cancer. This is the Kazemi moment inside the retrograde cycle. And something can become eliminated. And because this happens in Cancer, the insight could come through memory, emotion, family themes, home, belonging, tenderness, maybe the recognition of what you actually need versus what you've trained yourself to accept. And something that has been circling in the emotional waters may come clearer. And it might not even be logical. It could be just a really strong intuitive sense. And then on the 14th, we have the new moon in Cancer, and this feels a little softer. I'll say more as we get closer to that particular new moon. I feel like it's a seed being planted in extremely private soil and something that will need to be nourished and tended and given a place to belong. But it's an interesting... There's some interesting other things going on around this new moon that we'll talk about later in the month. So from 14th to the 19th, the sun moves into gate 62, the gate of details, which the gene keys progression is intellect, precision, and impeccability. And this gate brings a really different frequency. After the emotional waves, provocations, beginnings, and surprises with the first half of the month, gate 62 says, okay, what are we doing with this? How are we organizing this? How are we clarifying this? How there might be a tendency during this particular sun transit for it to bring some overthinking. So we have to be careful about that. It's very easy in a volatile month to generalize or make sweeping conclusions or go to the fear-mongering or feel like that everything is a catastrophe. And this is an opportunity to pull back and say, okay, let's look at the truth. What happened? What was said? What do you know? What are you assuming? What needs to be clarified? What's the next practical step? And I feel like the shadow of this gene key is intellect, and I don't mean this. I don't think it's meant by the intellect is bad. It means that the mind can become. It can overwork, and it can be detached from truth. It can analyze endlessly without ever seeing what's truly there, right? Precision is different. Precision, I also feel like, incorporates intuition. It knows the difference between a fact and a story. It knows when language is sloppy. It knows when a boundary needs to be put in place. It knows when the issue is not everything is falling apart, but instead, okay, this specific thing needs attention. And in a month like July, precision is needed. And then we have, a beautiful bridge here for Mercury stationing direct later in the month, because it reminds us clarity is often built through refinement. We don't always get the last sentence immediately. Sometimes we have to live through the messiness of things, review things, revisit conversations, and sort of let the emotional charge settle before actual words arrive. So gate 62 sort of helps translate that experience into something useful. And then we get to what I would consider the next big tension point of the month, which is on July 20th when Jupiter is opposing Pluto. And this is another one of the big powerful signatures of the month. Jupiter in Leo wants expansion and radiance and creativity and confidence and visibility and generosity and the courage to occupy more space. And Pluto in Aquarius is working at the level of systems, groups, technology, power structures, collective futures, the deeper transformation of how we participate in the larger field. And I feel like when Jupiter opposes Pluto, we can see growth and power confronting one another. And this can bring ambition and intensity and obsession and power struggles, ideological clashes, dramatic expansions, or the realization that something you thought was about growth is also tied up in control. And I feel like we're going to see this both in your individual lives and also in the collective. You'll notice what area, if you find Leo and Aquarius in your charts, you'll see where the tension point is going to be for you specifically. But I do think that there's going to be, throughout the month of July in the world, a lot of conversations around power and leadership, and it just has a lot of energy for miscommunication and sort of sleight of hand conversations. So just be mindful. This is the Jupiter opposition to Pluto is a transit where we have to ask really honest questions about motivation. Where am I expanding from genuine aliveness, and where am I expanding because I'm trying to prove something? And that's I want to prove something to someone else, or I want to prove something so that I can belong. Both of those things can come up. Where am I claiming confidence, and where am I compensating for an old wound? Where do I want to be I want more because my soul is saying yes to something, and where do I want more because the ego is terrified of being ordinary or unseen or irrelevant or left behind. This is one of those where if you are the pressure to keep up with the Joneses it's a little testing. If you're trying to break away and walk a slightly different path, that may be tested as well, because Jupiter, Pluto can create this massive transformation, but it can also inflate the shadow. It can make that endless hunger, especially for material possessions, feel like almost holy, right? It can make power feel justified. It can make control justified. It can make the need to win feel like destiny. So this is a transit where humility is not weakness. Humility is everything. So from July 20th to the 24th, the sun moves through Gate 56, the Gate of Stimulation, with the Gene Keys progression of distraction, enrichment, and intoxication. And this is such a perfect gate for this part of the month because after all the intensity, the mind may want a story, and Gate 56 is connected to experience and storytelling and stimulation, meaning making, and the way we digest life through narrative. And at the shadow frequency, distraction becomes a problem. We chase stimulation because we don't want to acknowledge what we already know. We consume more information, more content, more opinions, more drama, more interpretation, more hot takes, more everything, because being constantly stimulated keeps us from having to sit with the actual feeling. But in July, the distraction machine is very tempting, right? There'll be a lot to interpret. There may be unexpected news, strange conversations, sudden shifts, emotional revelations, power dynamics, and there's going to be enough energetic static to make you want to scroll till, doom scroll till your soul leaves your body and files a formal complaint. But Gate 56 is asking us to notice the difference between enrichment and distraction. And enrichment helps us digest experience. Distraction helps us avoid it. Enrichment brings meaning. And sometimes the meaning, this is the weird thing. I feel like sometimes the meaning can be mystery. That you don't need to know everything. Everything doesn't have to make 100% logical sense for it to have meaning, right? That's part of connecting to nature. That's part of connecting to divinity. And then on July 22nd, the sun enters Leo, shifting the solar emphasis from Cancer's emotional waters to Leo's fire and creativity and visibility and courage and heart. But this Leo season doesn't exactly begin with glitter cannons and main character music, because on the 23rd, the sun will square Chiron, and Mercury stations direct after being in Cancer. So as the sun enters the sign of radiance, it immediately is going to be touching on the wound a little bit, and that could cause a little bit of emotional upheaval. And, it could be subtle, though. It really depends on your own personal chart. But with all that's happening prior to that, you may not feel the desire to get up and roar like perhaps in past years. And that's okay. That's okay. That's another place where Gate 56 matters. What story are you telling yourself about what's happened? Is that story enriching your understanding, or is it keeping you in the drama of the wound? And Mercury going direct in Cancer gives us a chance to respond with a little bit more emotional maturity. It says, I can honor what this brings up without letting the old wound rewrite the whole narrative. And then on July 26th, Saturn stations retrograde in Aries. This is another major turning point of the month where it's asking us to review structures and responsibilities and commitments and boundaries and disciplines that we've been building around Aries themes, which are identity and courage and action and agency and desire and selfhood. And, Saturn is in its fall in Aries. It's not always comfortable because Aries wants immediacy and Saturn wants maturity. I have Saturn in Aries in my natal chart, so I'm super familiar with this configuration. And Saturn says, Aries says now, and Saturn says, can this hold? And Aries says, I want. And Saturn says, are you willing to take responsibility for that? And Aries says, I'm going. And Saturn says, okay, then let's do this right. And when Saturn stations retrograde, we may have to revisit where we've confused urgency with courage and independence with isolation and anger with clarity. I suspect that the anger with clarity and action with readiness, that those things are, especially towards the end of the month as things progress, are going to be, there's going to be a need for review. And this is not about stopping forward momentum forever. It's just about, okay, let's just take a breath and let's look at the foundation that we've been building and make sure that it's solid. And, Saturn retrograde in Aries is asking if the person is taking action is actually mature enough to steward the consequences of that action. And I feel like this is a big question, especially in a month filled with Uranian disruption and Plutonian intensity. So from July 25th through the 30th, the sun moves through Gate 31, which is the gate of leading, with the progression up in the gene keys of the shadow being arrogance and the gift being leadership and the city being humanity. And I think this is where the month becomes extremely pointed, because after all the disruption, review, provocation, emotional clarity, and power dynamics, we're arriving at leadership. And what does that look like now? Because leadership is not domination. It's not I'm the loudest person in the room. So obviously I've been chosen by, God and the algorithm. That's not what this is. That's the shadow frequency where arrogance appears when leadership becomes disconnected from service. And it's the assumption that, having a title or a platform, an opinion, or a moment of visibility automatically means that one has earned trust, and that is certainly not true. July may show us a lot about leadership, both personally and collectively. Who reacts and how they react under pressure, who responds, who escalates chaos because it feeds their ego, who can stay grounded enough to tell the truth without making everything about themselves, who is using fear to gather power, who is using clarity to create coherence. And these questions may show up in the world around us, but they also apply internally. We all have places where the ego wants to grab the microphone. And we all have places where we mistake being right for being wise. And Gate 31 asked us to examine what kind of leadership our lives are asking for right now. And I feel like this is especially important because on the 27th, the sun is going to oppose Pluto. And on the 29th, Venus squares Mars, and the sun conjoins Jupiter. And we've got this full moon in Aquarius. And this is a lot of energy packed in the final stretch of the month. It's the sun opposing Pluto can bring power dynamics, confrontations, revelations, intensity, endings, or something that has been hidden is no longer willing to be hidden. And Leo and Aquarius can bring tension between the personal radiance and the collective power. The whole month has this charge between personal, and it's the tension between the personal and the collective, the group belonging. The heart and the system, the leader and the network, the performer and the audience, the self and the future. Where are we giving our power away to be accepted, and where are we using personal charisma to avoid accountability in the larger field? And then towards the very end of the month, we've got Venus squaring Mars on July 29th, and that adds relational and financial and energetic friction to the mix. Venus in Virgo, like I said earlier, wants refinement, discernment, usefulness, and care through practical means. And Mars in Gemini wants motion, conversation, stimulation, options, mental engagement. And this tension between what we value and how we act, between desire and irritation, between the need for thoughtful refinement and the impulse to scatter it and energy everywhere. This can be a transit where the little things become big things because they reveal some underlying mismatch. And this can be incredibly productive point of tension into a personal attack. And I could say that for just about the entire month. Then the Sun conjoins Jupiter in Leo, which can be a really nice transit, generous, expansive, heart-opening. But because it happens during the same larger window as the Sun opposite Pluto and the Aquarius full moon, I just don't feel like it's like simple sunshine. It's an amplification, because don't forget, Jupiter isn't just about abundance. It's also about expansion. And that doesn't mean just expanding on all the good stuff. It makes everything bigger. So if the heart is open and generous and grounded, that expansion can feel, like courage and creativity and renewed vitality. But if the ego is hungry or wounded or desperate to be validated, that expansion becomes dramatic, inflated, a little too convinced of its own righteousness. So again, we go back to respond versus react. Let the heart open, but keep the roots deeply in the ground. Hence why we worked on that in June. And the full moon in Aquarius on July 29th, it sort of brings the culmination and illumination around belonging, community, future vision, systems, friendships, networks, technology, and the tension between individual expression and collective participation. But as we go through the month, we'll talk about that more a little later on. So that brings us to Gate 31. Leadership at the gift level is not arrogance. It's about the ability to hear the moment and speak to what serves us all. And that may sound grand, but it can be pretty simple. And then finally, on July 31st, the Sun moves into Gate 35, the Gate of Change. It's also sometimes called the Gate of Privacy by some, with the gene keys progressing from forgetting and mindfulness and revelation. And that's, I think, a really fascinating way to end this month, because it's connected to experience and change and progress, and looking forward to what comes next. And after a month of unexpected turns and emotional reviews and sudden disruptions and recalibrations and power confrontations and leadership questions, this particular transit is going to probably reveal a lot. The shadow is forgetting, which I think is a pretty important word for the end of July. We can go through intense experiences and still forget what they taught us if we rush too quickly to the next thing. We can receive the lesson and then immediately bury it under stimulation or drama or productivity or the need to move on. And Gate 35 is asking us not to waste the experience of what we've lived through. Mindfulness here is not just about being calm. It's about staying awake in the life that you are living. It is about noticing what has changed you. It's noticing where you are now. And when we look at July as a whole, the message is not that everything is going to fall apart. I'm sure there'll be a lot of twists and turns that we can't predict yet. And there was some astrology that I did not talk about. But the message is that this is a month where the script is it's unlikely to stay perfectly intact. There's going to be unexpected conversation and sudden pivots and emotional realizations and changes in relationships or values. There's going to be pressure around growth and visibility and power dynamics and some old stories coming up. But the deeper teaching here is not about trying to control the unexpected. It's about cultivating enough inner steadiness that the unexpected does not automatically become a crisis, and that we don't take everything personally, right? when I look at the sun transits throughout July, Gate 52 says pause. Gate 39 says notice what the provocation is revealing. Gate 53 says let the new thing develop before you don't have to know the entire road. 62 is get a little bit more specific. 56 says choose enrichment over distracting. 31 says lead from steadiness, not arrogance. And 35 says don't forget what the experience revealed. That's sort of the arc of July. Expect the unexpected, yes, but don't hand your power over to the surprise. Let the surprise become information. Let the tension become refinement. Let the disruption show you where something was already tight or too stale or too false or too small. And let the retrograde slow you down enough to review the story before you keep building from it. Because in August, we're going to enter into eclipse season, and that's going to strip more away. So the next 2 months are a lot about twists and turns and refinement. And when the month gets loud, because at some point it probably will, if it hasn't already, by the time you listen to this, come back to the simplest practice available. Pause long enough to know whether you're reacting from an old pattern or responding from the person that you want to be responding from. This is where the gold is for this month. It's not predicting in every twist. It's not predicting every twist. It's in becoming steady enough to be able to meet the twist without abandoning yourself. And that's what I have for you. I will come back periodically in the month and break a little bit more down. If you are on my email newsletter list, you'll get weekly updates. So if you're not already, you can grab that or sign up for that in the show notes. And through it all, remember to find beauty every day and seek the magic in the mundane. Or responding from the person that you want to be responding from. This is where the gold is for this month. It's not predicting in every twist. It's not predicting every twist. It's in becoming steady enough to be able to meet the twist without abandoning yourself. And that's what I have for you. I will come back periodically in the month and break a little bit more down. If you are on my email newsletter list, you'll get weekly updates. So if you're not already, you can grab that or sign up for that in the show notes. And through it all, remember to find beauty every day and seek the magic in the mundane. Thanks for tuning in today. As always, take what resonates, leave the rest. Let whatever landed move through you in whatever way it needs to or wants to. And also, if you want to explore more, you'll find more information in the show notes. If this episode stirred something in you, please share it out or leave a quick review. It helps so much and I really appreciate it. And remember, this work is about integration, and it always starts with self-trust.